Thank you all for coming out tonight. And I want to especially just start out, kick things off, and thank the Way Station and the United Presbyterian Church for allowing us to come in and provide this information tonight. This is our second in an informational series. Last week we presented on soil. That is available online. If you missed that session, we have it recorded, and you can get that online. I'm going to stand back here. A couple of housekeeping things before we get things kicked off. We are recording tonight's meeting. So I have the microphone. I'm going to give Matt the microphone. So as we ask questions, we will have folks throughout the room. Please speak into the microphone so that your friends and family who maybe missed tonight and want to see it, they'll be able to hear all the good questions that you ask us tonight on this topic. So again, this is being recorded and we'll have it posted on our website. The other point I wanted to make is you should be getting these newsletters in the mail. In this last issue, we'll have the QR code not only for this meeting, but last week's meeting is in this issue. So if you want to watch that video, that's available. So with that, one last housekeeping thing. Tonight we'll do our best to answer what we can. Health questions, we don't have a health person here tonight, but I do have some information for the health clinic. That's really the best place to have those kinds of questions answered, but we will do our best to talk about the science of air tonight with Matt. And if we run out of time or you need to get back home and it's a weeknight, we have the EPA Welcome Center. Please come. We're open Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we can make an appointment. We can bring experts in, and you can have one-on-one time with them. So if we aren't able to get to everything tonight, please, that is always available to you as well. All right, so now I'm going to get on to just introduce tonight's speaker. So we have, first of all, my name is Diane Russell. I'm EPA's Community Involvement Coordinator, and I'll just be helping facilitate things tonight. And Matt's going to spend time speaking with you all on the topics that we outlined to talk about air monitoring and sampling. And he's going to show you a few slides. He's got some equipment as well. We've got some maps around the room, so lots of information that we can walk through. We're also going to show you some online resources that he'll present and show with you tonight. But otherwise, I'm going to hand it off to Matt. Matt Villicana is EPA's on-scene coordinator, and he does that work full-time, but he's also a part-time back in Illinois firefighter. So he's been on the response. He's EPA's lead on air monitoring and sampling. He's been here for the last week and a half or so, and he's, just like with a lot of our teams, rotating in. This is his second time back in East Palestine working on air monitoring and sampling. And we will go ahead and kick things off, and I'll hand it over to Matt. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Diane. So, as Diane mentioned, I'm on my second deployment out here, and I'm leading up the air monitoring and sampling branch, so that's why they asked me to come speak to you guys tonight. So, we're going to try to help clear up some questions that you guys might have had about our air monitoring, sampling procedures that we've been doing throughout the response. So, first of all, we're going to go through what's the difference between air monitoring and sampling. So, air monitoring, we're getting real-time data. We're using these equipment, so we have all the equipment on the right side of the table, area array, multi-ray, dust track, and then a SPM flex. We're getting real-time data with those, and those are actually, a lot of that data for all the equipment is funneled up through wireless telemetry so we can see it remotely. So that's the second topic. We can actually view that data remotely, and that's primarily what my task is out here when I'm working out I work out at the forward operation base on the west side of town, but so yeah, I'm actually monitoring the data, making sure, as well as my contractors, we're making sure that the data is coming in, that we're not getting any alerts. Like I mentioned on the third top bullet point, so all that is, we can get alerts if the sensors are detecting any exceedances or anything wrong with the instrument itself. So that's one major pro of the air monitoring devices. And then we also have the opportunity, or the ability to be mobile, so we can take these pieces of equipment around to various points around the perimeter or out in the community. But then we also have devices that are more stationary. So for example, on the right side of the table, you got that big black and gray device. That's the area ray. That's our stationary device. But then right next to it is a smaller version. That's the mobile version. So our contractors can carry that around and use those devices to see like if we have to fill in gaps between areas, or we have questions in certain areas about odors and whatnot. So the next bullet is that these meters can be very specific, or they can be generic. So for example, you probably heard a lot of talk about photoionization detectors or flame ionization detectors. They're both types of instruments that look for volatile organic compounds. Those are more on the generic side because they're looking at total. So there's a lot of volatile organics in the air, from anything from like gasoline, diesel fuel. A lot of those have different types of volatile organic compounds. So those are more generic, but then we also have the capability to look for stuff that is on a more specific side. So for example, that yellow and black device, that's the SPM Flex. We use that one to look for a single gas, very specific instrument. So that one's very, very good at looking for single gases and whatnot. We also have some other pieces of equipment that look for very specific gases. Like for example, you've probably seen our big toggle bus driving around town or around the community and around the excavation site. That's looking for butyl acrylates specifically. So that's obviously one of our devices that is very specific. And then finally, these devices, they do have the capability to detect at very low levels. So for example, the photoionization detectors that I talked about earlier on the multi-ray and the area ray, those are looking down at the parts per billion level. So can get down as low as 10 parts per billion. So that's one advantage of having these very precise instruments, is that we can actually see at these very low health levels that are below the health screening levels that we are looking for. Whereas now with sampling, on the other hand, that we're getting very precise laboratory grade data. So for example, we actually collect these samples in materials like the 2 silver canisters over there, or we even have these little badges, those are passive badges, or even that blue pump that actually has a sorbent tube on the end that collects the air into a specific media. Those get sent off to a very third-party lab, and they get analyzed. So they actually go through the various analytical methods that are used for specific compounds, and they produce very low level, usually in the parts per billion level. They can even get lower at times. So you get that laboratory grade data. And as I mentioned, they're very specific. So for example, the 2 silver canisters, those are looking for those volatile organic compounds that I mentioned earlier. So for example, from the train, we had the vinyl chloride. That was probably the volatile organic compound that you've heard most about. Those SUMA canisters are able to collect and be analyzed down to the very low levels that are much lower than the health screening criteria. So the third bullet, they're typically stationary. So these devices, like the 2 SUMA canisters, you'll see them hanging on posts or stop signs, stuff like that, because they're looking for pulling a sample of air for that specific area, and then we set them up around in an area so that we can cover the whole area in case the wind shifts and whatnot. We can see throughout the day, throughout a 24-hour period, what type of exposure people might be having as we gather that sample. They can also be more mobile and worn on people. For example, like those badges or even the little blue pump. Those can actually be worn on a person if they're doing anything in the excavation or whatnot. But what we've been using them for is we're using them all for stationary, because that's what we're here to mainly setting up around the accident site just to protect the community. So we're keeping them stationary so that we know what we're seeing over time around the community. And as I mentioned before, these are also very capable of looking at the very low levels. So like I mentioned, we're going to go through a little later about the units and whatnot, but they're able to get down to micrograms per cubic meter, which is approximately like a parts per billion. But they're able to see at those very low levels, which very much lower than any kind of like health level that we would be looking for and try to prevent from you all being exposed to. The one con to actually two cons to the sampling. One, that we can't see real-time data. We have to wait for the sample to actually be collected, and then we have to send it off to the lab to be analyzed. So that takes, we're doing rush turnarounds on these, so we're getting them back much faster than we would on a normal project, but still it takes time. And then after they're collected, those samples have to be go through what's called a validation process, where they actually, a chemist will go through and look at the package that we get back from the laboratory and make sure that everything, all the methods, everything was followed, like quality assurance, quality control procedures, all those were followed appropriately, so that we know that the data that's received in those packages from those samples is up to the utmost quality, and it's very indicative of what you guys could have been exposed to at the time. So we have some examples here, but we have a lot of equipment on site. So as I mentioned, the ionization detectors, looking for the volatile organic compounds like the vinyl chloride. We also have like very specific electrochemical sensors. Those are usually, though we use those more during the actual like initial emergency stage, where we were looking for like phosgene and other specific gases that could have been released from the fire. We have very specific gas monitors like the SPM Flex. We have I know that the Norfolk's contractors, they have some that are also, they're using that are looking specifically for butyl acrylate as well. We have the sorbent tubes, so those again, we use those more on the air monitoring side. We use those more at the beginning because we could actually see different chemicals like vinyl chloride very specifically with the sorbent tubes. Now we've transitioned where we're actually using the sorbent tubes to collect samples. So that's just another opportunity for us. As I mentioned before, we have those batch samples. Those are passive batch samplers. So literally they're just hanging, and as the air moves through the area and whatnot, that sample will collect, and it'll be analyzed offsite at a lab as well. As I mentioned, they had those two Suma canisters. Those are those silver things. Those look like, I've been told they look like tea kettles, but they've been hanging on posts and stop signs and whatnot. And like I mentioned, those are looking for those volatile organic compounds. And then you've seen, we have these on tripods, we have these big gray or black cases, and those are particulate monitors. So those are the stationary form of the particulate monitor. And why we're monitoring for the particulates is because, A, we want to keep the dust down. We don't want you guys, we know we're visitors in your community, and we want to make sure we're keeping the dust down just to keep everything cleaner. But also, we want to make sure that, if there were any type of contamination in the dust or in the soil or anything like that, we want to make sure that's not getting transferred to you guys by the dust. So that's why we're always monitoring for the particulates to make sure that the dust is kept down. And that's why I keep seeing those water trucks driving up and down the road, and also with the street sweepers. We're trying to keep it as clean as possible to make sure we keep that dust down to protect you guys. And then these last three in the red. So these are the gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer. That's, these three in red, these are like laboratory grade equipment that we have on site that we've been using. So the gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer, also GCMS, you guys may have heard. That's what we use to look for volatile organic compounds primarily, but we're using it as a monitoring device. We have it set up in a car where we can actually, if we get detections of any type of butyl acrylate in the community, we can actually mobilize this and collect a sample real quick and analyze it right there to make sure there's no potential threat to the community. So that's one thing that we are very privileged to have here and make sure we're protecting you guys. The other one is the trace atmospheric gas analyzer. That's that big bus you see keep rolling around. It's laboratory grade material or equipment in there, and it's actually looking specifically for butyl acrylate as well. And that's because that is the best piece of equipment aside from the gas chromatograph and then the next one. But those are the best things to look for butyl acrylate. So we realized that to get down to the levels that we need to see for butyl acrylate, we need laboratory grade equipment. So that's why they brought it in, and that's all they're looking for all day as they drive up and down the road. And then the final one is the proton transfer reaction mass spectrometer. That's the PTRMS. So following a big bus, you'll probably see there's two other Sprinter vans that are following it. Those two Sprinter vans they carry the PTRMS, which is a very similar technology. And again, they're only looking for butyl acrylate. And the reason they're following our bus is because right now they're being evaluated on whether the numbers they receive match our TAGA, the trace atmospheric gas analyzer. And we're making sure that they're matching as well, like very closely, so then we can know that if they were to work independently so they can all cover more ground, we want to know that they're actually, their numbers are matching ours, so then we can know that you're all being protected. So, I've already mentioned a lot of this, but what's being monitored for? So those VOCs, those volatile organic compounds, we're not only monitoring for them with the photoionization detector and some other piece of equipment, but we're also sampling for those with those Summa canisters. Then we have the butyl acrylate. Again, we're monitoring for it with the bus, the TAGA bus, but we're also sampling for it in two methods. We're using the blue pump with the sorbent tube, as well as those passive batch samplers. So we're trying to collect as many samples for it as we can to make sure we're getting good quality data to make sure that you guys are protected. Then there's the ethyl hexyl acrylate. That was another chemical that was on the train, and we're only sampling for that one because again we only had a sampling method for it. So then we're also currently monitoring for vinyl chloride. We're not specifically monitoring for it yet. We have potential to switch over. We do have our gas chromatograph mass spectrometer that is capable of detecting the vinyl chloride. Once they get into that area where we expect to see a lot of vinyl chloride, we're going to use that instrument much more. But then we're also sampling for it, because again, that's a volatile organic compound that I mentioned, and those are being collected in those Summa canisters. So we're still monitoring for lower explosive limit, just because, vinyl chloride is potentially a flammable threat, so we want to make sure we're covering all bases. We don't expect to see anything in terms of flammability or lower explosive limit, but we want to make sure that we're monitoring for it just in case. Again, oxygen. Some of these gases, they have the potential to displace oxygen at very high levels. So that's one reason we're monitoring for oxygen, is to make sure that we're not actually having any sort of chemical like butyl acrylate, vinyl chloride, anything that could displace oxygen. And that'd be another way for us to detect if there's a change in the percentage of oxygen. And then finally, like I mentioned, we're monitoring those particulates. So those, just to keep that dust down, just to prevent not only to keep things clean, but to make sure you guys are all protected from any potential hazardous dust in the air from either the piles while they're loading or from the excavation itself. So we're just making sure, trying to cover all bases, make sure that you guys are not getting exposed to anything. So you've heard me mention a few times the TAGA. So we have the route here. So they start off, this is where our forward operation base is, and they drive down Park Avenue all the way, and then we'll meet up with those two PTRMS units that are being provided by Norfolk. They'll meet up over right by the derailment site, and then they follow this route the whole day. So they go down Taggart all the way into Pennsylvania, and then they come back, and then they start heading up into crossing at Pleasant Crossing. They go on the north side of the excavation area, the derailment site, and then they'll come back and they repeat that route all day. There's another map of it over there for if you guys want to look at it afterwards. But they're following this, and the reason they've chosen this route is because primarily due to we want to keep it close to the excavation and the derailment site to make sure that we're an interceptor for any potential off-site release. So if we detect it early on around the perimeter of the derailment site, we know that we'll start putting in controls and start making the contractor use a material called butyl buster and whatnot to suppress the vapors. So, and then we have other technologies as well that they can do and other methods that they can do to make sure if we start getting detections that they can limit those exposures. So yeah, they follow that all day. And then that's something I can watch remotely, again, because we have that capability since we can see that real-time data remotely. So I'm watching that all day, and they're giving us updates all day. If they have anything above a 20 parts per billion detection, they're notifying me. Our action level is at 50. So once they get to that 50 ppb level, they'll notify me, and that starts a whole what's called a decision tree. And so then what they'll do is they'll go back to the spot they saw the 50. If it's still there, then they'll go to the nearest residential receptor. So there's this decision tree we've been using the past few days because the areas that they've been excavating in are a little higher in butyl acrylate. So, and today being a warmer day, actually we lucked out and we weren't seeing very high readings, but the past few days prior, we actually did have some higher readings. And every time they would follow the decision tree and they would go and look at the nearest residential receptor, and we weren't seeing the levels. Again, like I had mentioned, we had them, we were directing Norfolk Southern also to spray that material. It's called butyl buster to suppress those vapors. So then on the next turn, when the TAGA and the two PTRMS vehicles came back, they weren't seeing it. So we know that stuff works, is very effective, and it works very quickly. So we're actively telling Norfolk Southern to make sure they're using that stuff liberally to make sure we keep those vapors down, because even the vapors can be an irritant, and we don't want that. So even because the butyl acrylate has such a low odor threshold, so you can smell it at such low levels, we want to prevent that because, like I said, it's an irritant. We don't want you guys being exposed at all. And so CTEH wasn't able to be here tonight, but we want to show kind of what CTEH is also doing. They're providing air monitoring under our oversight for Norfolk Southern. And this is how many air monitoring points they collected over a 4-day period. So as you can see, we're making them do a wide coverage. So they're going through all the neighborhoods, collecting, these are just for volatile organic compounds, but they're just constantly going around doing mobile air monitoring, looking for volatile organic compounds as well as other materials under our direction and oversight. So we see all their data, we review it, and we make sure that it's good and accurate data. Okay, so who is conducting the work? So, like I mentioned, well, you have us, which is EPA, we're the emergency response branch. There's a lot of us here, mainly from Region 5, but we also have other regions like we have people here from Denver, from Boston, we have someone here from Washington, D.C. We have a lot of people here from different offices and different regions supporting us. We also have our environmental response team. They're mainly on the TAGA bus that's rolling around town. That's one of our assets through the environmental response team. That's actually out of Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. And we have another one that's here as well, helping out, but that one's usually sits out at our forward operation base. We have our contractor for EPA, which is START. It's Tetra Tech. This is one of our members here, but we have a lot of them. You'll probably see them around town with the meters, either calibrating meters or collecting samples or just driving around doing the mobile air monitoring. And then on the Norfolk side, they have CTEH, and that's their main contractor doing the air monitoring and sampling. So you might be wondering, like, especially for like particulates or volatile organic compounds. So we get detections throughout the day, or we'll get, especially with dust, sometimes we'll see it's dusty out. Like, how do we know the difference? Like, as we're, whether it's just typical roadway dust, or if it's when we're getting volatile organic compound detections, how do we know that if it's what it is? Well, every time we get an exceedance, we send out our contractor, Tetra Tech, our contractor, to go verify if it's an actual detection and sustained detection. And not only, so then we make sure that if we are getting sustained detections and whatnot, that all gets forwarded up through my branch, up through the operations, and then all the way to the top. And we make sure we communicate that just in case we have to do any additional community protection. But then we're also supplementing all this monitoring with sampling. So for volatile organic compounds, like I mentioned, we're collecting those SUMA canisters for butyl acrylate, the badges, and the sorbent tubes. So we're doing a lot of collection in terms of sampling, just to make sure that what we're monitoring for and what we're seeing in the monitors is exactly what we're experiencing in real life. So yeah, we're being covered on two fronts: either monitoring to give us kind of a quick idea, a real-time idea of what's going on, but then also the sampling so we can confirm what we saw in the field. And then again, this is a map that was created just to show the wide sampling network that we have between our contractors, the EPA contractors, as well as CTH, who are the Norfolk's contractors. So as you can see, we have a wide sampling net that covers the whole town pretty much, or at least that whole eastern side of the town especially. And that's just to make sure that we're trying to cover all bases and make sure that everyone is going to be protected. And so we wanted to show that, yeah, there's a whole lot of samples being collected every day that are for your protection. And then, so now we're going to go into the kind of the using the dashboard, because I know some people aren't even aware of the dashboard, where the sample data is, but it is not an intuitive it's a dashboard. So I'm going to kind of try to help kind of explain how to not only use the dashboard, but also what the numbers mean. So my contractor here, he's going to kind of go through it, and we're going to kind of try to explain, like look at a few samples and then explain how to use it, but then also what the numbers mean. So if you want to exit out and go to the Google Chrome. All right, so if you just want to select a SUMA canister. So you'll see over here, steel canister. That's our SUMA, so that's why it just says steel canister. But again, so that's looking for volatile organic compounds. So when you click on one sample, it's going to give you a sample ID. So what you can do is, that one was collected on March 1st. So we will have the data presented for it. So he's going to go down, find that specific sample. And one of the things it's not as intuitive is if you have like 030, it's going to put it under 3. It's just one of the kind of things I don't know hinky about it, but and did you find? Yeah, there it was. So okay, so now he found it on the right side. So now what he's going to do, he clicked on it, and now it's presenting the data for that specific sample. So if you were to scroll all the way down, because we know we had vinyl chloride, if you were to scroll all the way down, you could go look at just vinyl chloride itself. There, so we had a detection of 0.036 micrograms per cubic meter. So what does that mean? That's a very low level. That's just barely above the detection limit of the instrument, and it's much lower than our screening criteria. All the way over here at the bottom, you'll see like a validation status. And that's one thing I mentioned earlier about like how our data is always validated. Like people, chemists off-site, they're looking at this data, making sure that all the quality checks are made, all the methods run properly, everything is done properly to make sure that the data is of the utmost quality. Again, result qualifier. If I were to go up to another result, like up here for the dichloropropene, you'll see a U, but then that U is also with a result that is less than. That means that U just means that it's just a non-detect. That's just one thing that labs use. I'm not sure why they picked U, but they did. But if you were to go to another sample, say like a badge sample, so that's a green triangle. So that one was collected on the 17th. We might not, so you're gonna see samples on here. When you click on it, you'll see it'll bring up a sample ID, but you won't see it on the right side. That just means that we're not hiding data. That just means that that sample, we haven't received the results yet. So once we receive the results, it all gets posted up here. So he's gonna bring up this badge sample, and that, like I mentioned, that's one of these badge samples that are looking specifically for butyl acrylate. So once he gets to it, 111, there we go. And here's the result. So less than 9 parts per billion, and it's since it's a U, like I mentioned, that just means that it's non-detect. And again, so now you can see on this one, the validation status, it's prelim. That means that we've received the data, we're posting it, but it still has to go through that validation process, which usually takes, depending on the data and how busy the chemists are, it could take like a week to like 2 or 3 weeks. So, but we still want to post that data and make sure you guys be able to see the data quickly. And so, I mean, that's that's how to use it. If you have more questions on it, we can certainly answer, or answer any questions just in general on air monitoring and sampling. So, yeah.
So once again, just wanted to make sure that everyone knew we are recording this, so folks who couldn't make it tonight, this will be available online, they can watch, so that your neighbors and friends want to hear your questions, that you use the microphone when you ask your question, and we'll continue to use this audio equipment. So I appreciate it, thank you.
All right, yes, sir.
I have a series of questions to ask you.
Yes, sir.
How have you tested up by High Street in this town?
I am not familiar with High Street. Can you indicate on a map where High Street would be? Like, so,
I've showed your office 5 times.
Well, I'm from Chicago, so I'm not exactly familiar. But yeah, can you, what side of town? Like northeast? North side?
Up Market Street.
Up Market Street. So we have a sample here at, I can't see the cross street, but it's at it's on Market Street.
That's higher.
So you're up higher? Okay, so we have butyl acrylate badge. I mean, I don't know where Gould Pond is, but we have a butyl acrylate badge that's up there. Again, that's where, let's see, that was collected on the 14th, which we might have data for, but I'm not sure. But so we are sampling to the north as well as around the rest of the.
You sampled once, I called 11 o'clock at night. I believe there's a difference between night air and day air, isn't there?
And we have seen so at night what we typically see is the air inverts. Yeah. So the cold air comes.
Well, I called down.
Yeah.
They came up at 11 o'clock in the morning.
11 o'clock in the morning? Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
I would have to look at our data.
That's 12 hours later.
Yeah, I would have to look at our data to see if it's a real mobile air monitoring point. Then typically they're visiting those multiple times per day. If not us.
No, you're not visiting up there. I've already got that answer.
Okay, well,
I've already got the answer. You're not going to change your route at night to cover the rest of town. There's some of us a little, like a mile 2 points out from this thing. You don't cover us, or mile 0.5.
So typically the reason for that is if we're not seeing it in the close vicinity, we're not expecting to see it further out. So that's why we're.
Well, when it goes up a hill, you shaking your head no? I've ingested oil, and I've got in here. I'm very familiar with a lot of this. It's 30 years old, but I'm so familiar with it. And the other thing is, you're not checking. You won't change route. You won't check it at night. That was the answer I got last week from Anna. And the guy from District 10 has seen my stuff to verify that some things were up on a hill.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Anna or someone from.
Well, District 10 is Seattle.
Oh, so our region 10. I'm not familiar with who that would have been, but well, like I said, I mean, we're not seeing it at the close proximity.
So you're not worried about us outside?
It's not that we're not worried. We have confidence that
My
it's not working that way.
brother-in-law accuses you of killing my wife.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you had your wife passed away, but
That's what he feels like.
I'm sorry.
And
that
he's
you feel
experienced in this not as well as I am. I spent times in oil. I think you need to go out further. I hope that Brian hadn't left when he would hear that, so he'd put it on the TV.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely take that under advisement. I'll take your concern directly.
It's been an advisement for 4 weeks.
I'm sorry to hear that. I got back here a week and a half ago. So, but I definitely take that seriously. So.
I mean, I went in 5 times in one day to find out what all the toxicity we were looking for.
Wait, can you repeat that?
The toxicity of the items that came out of the fire and all that.
I'm sorry, I can't. So the vinyl chloride it is a carcinogen.
That you can't test there for 1 day anyway.
Yeah, it's a volatile organic
But
compound.
we do have some that have tested with it.
Say that again, please.
We do have 2 people that have tested with it. And they've tested.
They have tested positive for vinyl chloride.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I was
There's
unaware
more
of that.
than 2.
It's about 18 now.
See, you people aren't worried about us.
Oh yes, we certainly are.
You are
And
not.
that's why we have the clinic set up, so we can make sure that if you have any concerns, you can either follow up with the clinic, the doctors at the clinic,
I have been to the clinic. I have been to the office. I've been to Ohio EPA, who got rid of some of my information, which, I can't remember his name now, from Seattle Saul.
his
I
name.
took his stuff out of my heater.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Good Electric came in and found it. 1/4 inch of smoke fumes.
1/4 inch of fumes. Okay.
Now, I'm here with Chip tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I've stayed away, but I've also called your folks and Ohio EPA liars. Because you're hiding behind it. You won't let me buy anybody behind that barrier out there, will you?
The
citizens
roadway
of
blocks.
town.
The roadway blocks.
Mm-hmm.
We're having those closed for safety because there's a lot of truck
You're
traffic.
afraid we'll hit you.
No, we're afraid that you might get hit because we have a lot of truck traffic driving through that area.
No. I'm talking about in your office.
In the office.
So I can talk about that. Hi, Diane Russell, EPA. So it is not a secret. You are welcome to come back there if you would like us to tour the room. We're happy to take you back. And I don't know that's not going to necessarily solve the issue.
At a public meeting.
But hey, and we are glad you are here. This is what this forum is for, is to get these questions answered. I just want to make sure, because you have very specific questions that you have been working with us on at various levels, folks that aren't here tonight.
Right.
And that's why we need
They're here for 2 weeks and gone.
Well, I know Mark has been here for quite a while, and
Have you seen my Mark?
Okay.
Sorry?
Have you seen me?
Not yet.
Not yet, but
You
you've
haven't.
seen him tonight. Now it's tonight.
I've been to your office enough times.
Well, Mark isn't always there, and this is why, again, the Welcome Center, it's good to make appointments, because if we have specific things we need to follow up with the technical experts, we can make those appointments, and we want to encourage folks that we will make that happen. So we want to follow
Anna
up
took
with
it,
you.
and she took my thing,
Yeah.
and I told her the answer was going to be, she said, oh no, we can straighten it out. She called me up and says, Reverend, you're right, you're not going to change it.
Well, but there's still some other issues that you brought up tonight that I think we need to still continue to touch base with you on. So, but thank you for that. And again, while this informational series is focused on air, we know people have a lot of different questions, and that's what that EPA Welcome Center is for. Let us work with you. We will find the experts we need to find to bring resolutions best we can. Again, 25 Market Street, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Saturday.
Try 600 Market Street.
Well, our office is at 25 Market
I
Street.
know, 600 is my house.
Okay, well, now we know where you live, and we'll be right over. All right, so did we have another question in the back?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I
Go ahead.
have a couple questions / concerns. You're with the EPA, right? National US EPA?
That's correct.
Yes.
I'm not an alarmist, and I'm not into hysteria, but I'm concerned that there are university professors out of Purdue who have to go through Freedom of Information Act releases to get some of this data released from the water and the soil and the air. And I know we may be talking about air tonight, but you guys are EPA, so I want to talk to you about that. Why would a public agency require federal or Freedom of Information paperwork has to be done by university professors to get data released on our town? We pay tax dollars to put you guys in business, as well as the CDC, who doesn't want to release all the information. So there's a concern that I'm having because this is coming through the clips. There's also been sporadic cases of people coming up positive for benzenes and other chemicals in their urine. Folks have gone to local labs, and local labs have been told by the CDC, which is another federal agency, not to test for this stuff. It doesn't last in the system long enough. It's a waste of money.
And the VA.
Now, and the VA, probably. Another federal agency. You folks have been very good about getting on the ground here and open up that shop downtown. And it's appreciated. What's not appreciated, what's going to induce more conspiracy theories, and rightfully so now, is this type of information not being released when it's gotten, I don't care who evaluates the information from the EPA or CDC. There are university professors around this country that are interested in that information too. And it should be released to the public. There have been talks about judges saying, well, this certain information is not going to be released. We'll release this document, but certain things are going to be blacked out of that document. Just like the Pentagon does. This is not an issue of national security. This is an issue of our health security here. And I don't understand why our national programs like the EPA and the CDC, the Ohio EPA yet,
They're the same.
Why these agencies are not releasing information as it comes through that mass spectrometer or that gas chromatographer in the labs. Because there's not just the EPA that's going to be looking at those numbers, and not just the CDC. We have a lot of people around this country that are interested in these numbers. And a lot of different people can interpret numbers differently. And what's happening is, I understand the agencies don't want to induce panic with the population here in East Palestine. You're going to induce more conspiracy theories and more worry when you don't come forth with this information as it comes out. And if again, I'm going to check on this guy from Purdue. But if he really has had to file release or Freedom of Information release requests, there's a problem. Why would you even need to go through that hoop? What's it? Okay, I'm done.
So thanks. You're absolutely right. When information is gathered, it should be publicly available. We completely agree. Let me give you a couple examples. The air data that Matt talked about. When that data is gathered, we put up preliminary data even before it's validated. Typically, we don't do that. We are doing that here for the exact reasons that you're stating. So that is happening. All right. Water data. The water data is currently not being collected by US EPA. The water data is being collected under the oversight of Ohio EPA, and the actual work is being done by Norfolk Southern, but Ohio EPA is collecting the data. I just looked at their water data website today, and it is there. They are posting. Ohio EPA is posting that data. I can't guarantee you that they have posted all the data and it's all up to date. So that's something we could follow up with for you. Soil data, what we talked about last week for those of you that were here. That's a different story. We need to make sure that data is validated. But with that, the soil data, those aren't immediate risks that we're dealing with. Those are longer term risks. So, it's the air data is, we need to get you information immediately. We understand that. With the soil data, we don't want to put out bad data. And so that we are waiting until final data comes in. However, some of the semi-volatile organic data and dioxin data that we're going to be posting within the next couple of days. We'll have some preliminary data, and we literally just talked to our lab and what we call our environmental unit personnel, and we've agreed that we're going to post some of that preliminary data. So we hear you, we agree with you, and for the most part, we are doing that. Now, for the university issue that you referenced, we have, to my knowledge, we have not received a FOIA. At least it hasn't gotten to my level yet. If it has, I'll certainly report back to you. But I just want to reassure you that we're getting data out as quickly as we can. So.
Yes, my name's Eric.
Wait, actually, I want to finish up with one more thing. So if you go to this dashboard, which by the way, you can find the dashboard, the link, the QR code you keep seeing, that same QR code will take you to a spot where you can view the air data. At the top of it, so right above the dashboard, there is a link here where you can download all our data and it says it's through the 20th of April. So that's probably all the data that we've received as of right now, because like I said, it usually takes about a week or so to get that data back from the lab. But you can actually go and it's there. You don't even need a FOIA request. You can go view the data. And like I said, the dashboard is up to date. As we receive sample data, they're updating it. So that data doesn't require FOIA. It's available.
And just as a follow-up comment, it could be that whatever's coming out of Purdue is not valid. It could be that whatever's coming out of this Purdue professor is not valid. That maybe that information is not correct about having to go through FOIA.
CDC. He FOIA'd the CDC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't you guys. He FOIA'd the CDC.
Oh, it was through the CDC.
Yes, I got it right here. He's got 3 of them out.
Okay, so it is accurate data coming out of Purdue that
That's
they
correct.
have been
I've
having
worked
to
with him a lot.
ask
It's
for
not.
FOIA
It
from
wasn't
the
against.
CDC.
And
the
just to
EPA.
kind of speak on that might be health information
It is.
for people, and just like us, we try to, if stuff's redacted, it would be addresses. It would be because people are entitled to their own personal privacy. So we don't want to release any data that might link a sample to a single property, because that's their personal identifiable information. So we want to make sure we're protecting people's privacy. And that's the only reason we would redact any information, is just to protect that privacy. I believe we had another question up here.
Jake, right?
Yeah. I'm one of the ones that tested positive for the vinyl chloride.
Yes, sir.
My fiance just tested positive as yesterday for vinyl chloride. The problem is are they doing something about digging up the tracks differently coming up the south side than they did the north side, for number one? Number two is, since I put my, results out there on social media, I've had 18 other people in this area that's tested positive for vinyl chloride. So what is being said, and this is what's causing the hysterica, the panic and stuff, is because now people are actually getting tested and they're testing positive for this stuff. And then, we went through, I went down to the clinic. They argued with me about even reading my test results. I went to 13 chemists and toxicologists saying that if this stuff, after 2 months of being, after 2 months, we shouldn't be having this in our urine. They said about smoking cigarettes. Well, it's in the nanograms of a cigarette, so you'd have to smoke about 20 packs a day. So us testing past the reporting limit of vinyl chloride, 18 of us so far in the test results for the children, most children are being held. I went down to my healthcare provider and I filmed it all. They said that through the CDC guidelines that there was a time frame that I had to fight to get a prescription for it. We're having to go to all kinds of places to even get a prescription to get tested for this. One person tested for not only that, for benzene. They've tested as far out as 3 miles, and I just had somebody report and show test results in Unity at even a higher level of vinyl chloride in their urine. So I was just wondering if they was going to do something differently, or if your test results, are these instruments reading low enough, or it's saying that I'm inhaling this, I forget what it was, 200 milliliters or something a day. to hit my reading. So that's, you know, I went down to the EPA station. I put my phone number and text messages in there, or email. I've never got a reply from them. I went down to the help center down in New Waterford. I really got an attitude down there. I got booted out because I called them a liar. And it's been like 18 so far that I know of. I know some of the attorneys are telling people not to hold back them records. So I'd imagine there's more. And I just want to know what, you know, this is becoming scary. And, you know, I live 0.3 miles away from it. And I have my fiance has myasthenia gravis, and it's an autoimmune. I'm scared to death. And then I got 6 people in my home. You know what I mean? I have a 6-bedroom house. I can't just pick up and go somewhere, and I'm getting what you guys are saying and what our test results are coming back is completely different. And that's my...
Yeah, so Jake, I wish I could give you a better answer than the answer I'm going to give you, but you deserve an answer. So there's a number of pieces to what you said there. The first question I think is extremely relevant to us because it has to do with the cleanup. Are we doing anything different? Right. So I was just down at one of your neighbors' houses yesterday. And I was watching the operation because her backyard literally is the site. Most of you know Shelby. And just watching the operation, and as the excavation was going, it was really close. The wind was actually in my direction. I got a small whiff of butyl alcohol. So we know it's happening. Yeah, so we know it's happening from an odor standpoint. But when we did the south track, we opened that whole trench up. And there was a lot of exposure there, and we saw a lot of spikes at the fence line when the south track was being excavated. Now that all that's been verified clean and backfilled. We're doing the north track differently because of the lessons learned from the south track, and that is we're doing it by section. So it's taking.
Why are we getting readings? I know it's hard for you to answer this, but why are we getting readings of above reporting limits of vinyl chloride in our urine?
Well, let me get to that. I wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it because the machines, like I know the VOCs, the machines, these ones, don't low enough to detect some of these? You know what I mean?
DA will not check vinyl chloride.
So I understand. So again, and you had a lot of questions in your question. So that's all right. That's all right. That's why we're here, right? And so to your point about, and you've asked me this several times about the equipment. But I just want to clarify the first part. Okay. We are doing the excavation differently on the north tracks. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, with respect to the equipment, this was actually your last question, but I'll address it now. You're right. We can't see the butyl acrylate at that lowest level. Now, hold on, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. We could. During the emergency phase, the levels are higher because it's short-term exposure. We understand that we can tolerate a little bit more on a short term. Now they've dropped those action levels pretty low, and with the vinyl chloride, that action level is 20 parts per billion. All right, as Matt said, the one instrument that can see vinyl chloride down between 10 and 20 parts per billion. So if we get a detection. We can see it at that action level, but not much below that action level. So that's an important factor to your point. Okay, that's why we have all the sampling networks set up. That gets to your other question about what's happening biologically, right? I know that blood and urine samples with these compounds is an increasing concern. We've heard it for the last several weeks. We heard it last week at the meeting. We heard it at the town hall meeting that you and I attended. The tough part with that is we have the site. We know the site's contaminated. We have the river. Sulphur Run is contaminated. The upper part of Leslie Run is contaminated. We know that. And when work's going on, there's a potential for vapors to release. So we're monitoring, as Matt clearly stated, we are seeing some levels at the fence line, but it's not sustained. And that's why all that sampling equipment's in place. And we're just not seeing around the perimeter of the site those releases. Now, could those extreme lower levels be creating something like that. We
Like
just
the
don't know, and
umbrella
that's why.
effect or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Because
know.
the further it's going out, the further this is going out, the test results are showing that it's higher above the test results. I'm at one level. If you go to Unity, it's way up there. If you go 3 miles past that, it's up to 3.8 miles from test results. And the further you go out, it seems like the higher it gets. So I don't know if it's an umbrella effect that this is happening, and maybe some of these testing needs to be brought out further. Maybe the bus needs to ride out a little further. I don't know, but I know that I've never been scared in my life, and with this in my urine, I'm scared.
Yeah, and that was the last point I was going to make, is that we were hoping to have, a toxicology expert with us tonight. It just didn't work out for us. So that's why we can't answer, or at least deal with some of the specific questions you asked. But I'm hearing a theme. You asked the same question that you're asking. Can we expand the air sampling program a little further in the community? So we'll take that question back to our experts. No promises, because we're not we're not the experts, but we hear you. Okay. Microphone, please.
It's sort of along the same line. However, I know you say you're not soil, but you say if it's in the dust, it can get in the air. I live on a back road 2.2 miles away, south. I have 6 chemicals in my soil. The guy that tested is actually going to contact you guys to see if he'll come down to test too, so that they can compare them and see where the levels actually are. But we're all sick. We're all dealing with respiratory problems. We live on a road, they used a lime base on it because it's got a protected water area there. Dust all the time.
Okay. So yeah, I'd be interested to know what the chemicals are.
And yes, I do. I have a.
Is that what you were going to ask me about, Tom, earlier? Okay.
Yeah, we know you've tested up above, but not down where we're at.
Yeah, and that's why I'm interested in the actual compounds, to know if it's even the same compounds we're looking at. So we'd like to see that. So,
Yes.
yeah.
You guys were talking about, you're sticking with like butyl acrylate, but there were maybe hundreds of compounds that were created. So like the ethyl hexyl acrylate, I seen that you said that you were starting to check for those, and you are just now going to start using a GC to check for the vinyl chloride. What about the acrylons and the other compounds that could have been created? So it all goes back to me. It feels like that you guys didn't do a risk assessment, a good one at least, to kind of maybe all the other things that could be out there that could have been created when you let them blow these cars up. So I'm wondering why we're so focused on butyl acrylate when there were lots of other compounds that were created.
So you're absolutely right. There were lots of other compounds that were created. So what we did, and then I'll turn it over to Matt to talk about what we're currently looking at. But during the emergency phase, we did set up some of these summa canisters. And these summa canisters aren't specific to 1 or 2 chemicals. We did what we call a TO15 check for volatile organic chemicals. So it's a whole suite of volatile organic chemicals. In addition to that, we ask our laboratories to identify tentatively identifiable compounds, or TICs. So we have a whole laundry list of chemical compounds that we were looking for back then. And every time we collect samples, the same compounds keep coming back to us, right? We do see a little bit of benzene, vinyl chloride, butyl acrylate, ethyl hexyl acrylate, and the glycols and some of the other materials that those aren't volatile, they're less volatile. Those are more of a soil concern than they are. But I will let Matt talk a little bit more about the range that we're collecting now. But I just wanted to assure you that we did look for more than just a couple compounds during the initial response.
Thanks, Mark. So I just want to clear up. So you mentioned acrolein. So if it's really small, so you can't really see, but we are sampling for acrolein. We're sampling for ethyl hexyl acrylate. That we've been doing we've been doing those samples for a while. Now, we didn't just start that one, but yeah, we've been sampling for acrolein since the beginning. We're not monitoring for it because it's the specific monitors for it are, we'd have to use the PTRMS and whatnot, or we could use the TAGA bus as well. But we're focusing that on the butyl acrylate because that's the one, well, that and our GCMS, those are units that they're the best at detecting butyl acrylate at that very low level. So we want to make sure since that has also the very low odor threshold, we want to make sure that we're actually monitoring for it. But again, we're actually sampling for acrolein, all those compounds, benzene. There's a lot that we are sampling for actively, and they are available on that dashboard. So either if you don't get a newsletter, we do have those QR codes that you can use, and you can just go view it all and find a spot that's closer to your house, and you can see what the data was. So there's usually in most points, there's multiple days worth of data, so you can see how it might be trending and whatnot.
Very hard to understand.
It is. I know that's kind of why we're here today, is because we want to try to explain it as much as possible. So if you have any specific questions about it, I'd be happy to answer that right now, because it is, we're looking at stuff that chemists and all develop, and so we understand that it is very hard to read, and that's why we're having this session. So if you have any specific questions right now, or like Diane had mentioned, you can make an appointment, and then they can get like myself or even one of our TAGA operators or another chemist to come down and help explain what everything means, because again, it is a lot of information. So we'd be more than happy to do that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to do a time check. It is 7, just a little bit after 7. We can stay and take a few more questions. We do have the space a little bit longer, but I just wanted to do that. And I also want to let folks know, same time, same place next week. We're going to have folks from Columbiana County Health Department here to talk about well testing results. So I just wanted to put that out there, let you know. Again, keep an eye on the newsletter for upcoming events and information. That QR code is also in the newsletter that comes into your mailbox. But go ahead, you have a question right here.
Yes, my name's Sheila Weaver. CTE came in and checked my house. On the bottom of it, it says cigarette smoke odor throughout the whole home. Now, what does that have to do with them testing for all this different stuff? Are they say they can't find it because I smoke?
What they're probably is just they're making an observation, just because, you've probably seen, is some of these chemicals are in cigarette smoke. We're not disqualifying like the fact that maybe you did have chemicals, but they're just making that note. I can't speak for their data, but I can say that they might have just mentioned that just because in case there were detections, maybe they could be attributed to that. But again, I can't.
There's one other factor, Matt. Part of the voluntary return to home program was an odor check because butyl acrylate, right, Jake, you can't smell it or you can't detect it at the very lowest level. So an odor check was one of the things that was really important for us to do to verify that we don't have a butyl acrylate problem around your neighborhood or around your home. So there was an odor check. So they probably put that down there. Yes, there was an odor, but it wasn't an odor common to butyl acrylate. Does that make sense? Okay.
That ain't going to be against anything that they may come up with. I'm not going to hesitate that on cigarette smoke.
I don't think so, but like Matt said, with the cigarette smoke, you can have some. I'll give you an example. I was completely different emergency response. I worked a couple years ago, and I walked into somebody's home while they were actively smoking, and my photoionization detector went off the charts while that was happening. And so I said, hey, can I come back tomorrow? Just make sure when I get there, there's nobody actively smoking. I came in, and the levels were non-detect, basically, until I got to the part of the house where she was interested in, where there was a potential problem. So if there's active smoking going on, we will see it on the photoionization detector. When there's cooking, we were in somebody's house recently here in East Palestine, and there was cooking going on. And the levels jumped up a little bit. After they were done cooking, we came back later and the levels were 0. So there are things that will make those meters jump, and so that's another reason why we do that. So.
Hi, this question has deal with the CTEH when they came to my business. And it was, I don't know, a couple of weeks after, I'm not sure what it says. It says that all of the areas, VOCs less than 0.1 ppm, strong odor, no detection found. But at the very bottom, this test was they were supposed to be in there 30 to 45 minutes. At the very bottom, it says strong odor, super glue, pool, fruity-like odor, unpleasant, overwhelming odor. The air monitoring team left within 10 minutes due to the unpleasant, overwhelming odor. This is a business. I don't cook. The business had not been open for 2 weeks because of the smell. I'm in the plaza right over where Sulphur Run runs. What are super glue, pool, and fruity-like odor referring to?
You make the armbands.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I thought I remembered you. That's a great question, and you know, some of those odors, that's right, that one gives me pause, because those odors, and I know where your business is, and you're right there by an area that's contaminated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you need to condemn that building.
that gives me pause. So that's something that I'd be interested in learning more about. So.
Is
Yeah.
that building, does Sulphur run under the
Yeah.
building? Okay, so, I know they have done cleanings of like the administration building, which again, Sulphur runs under that. I can't speak to that because that's not my area right now, but I know, and when was that test conducted?
February 14.
Okay, so okay, and is it, to this day, does that odor remain, or, because I know they were jetting out some of those sewers that run underneath the buildings.
I go in every day. For the last 6 weeks, I've been cleaning out and throwing out everything. My business is shut down because of it. I had to get rid of most of what I had in there. All my inventory was contaminated. My insurance company did finally tell me this past Monday that it was all contaminated. And I'm talking silicone wristbands. I have 250,000 of them there. It doesn't smell like it used to smell, but every day I go in for maybe 2 hours just to continue cleaning. I open the door, I put the fan in the door just to get rid of the smell. But it's still there slightly. I've gotten rid of almost everything that would have be doing the off-gassing.
Yeah, and again, your situation is very unique, being that the river, the creek runs underneath of it. I think Z, you were telling me the other day that you have some odor issues, and so I would recommend, if you do have odd, odors in the home, to obviously, now that the weather's nice, ventilate as much as you can. And that's another tough one to deal with. Again, you're unique because what you're describing to me, especially given the situation, is that you probably had some sustained levels of butyl, because that was the primary contaminant in the creeks, in your building, because it was coming up, the vapor was coming up right underneath of it, right? We know that was a problem with the city administration building, like Matt said. Yeah. So, but again, I would recommend anybody that has off odors in their home, regardless of whether it was from, the smoke, infiltration from the smoke, or other odors, as it is, just to ventilate the home now that the weather's nicer.
But why did they say no detection was found if they couldn't even be in there for 10 minutes?
Well, they obviously detected something with their nose, right?
Yeah.
And again, that one, like I said, that gives me pause, right? That concerns me. It's situation concerns me.
And they were probably looking again at the photoionization detector, which we recognized may not have seen it at that low level, which may have been higher. But that's why we have those other devices like the gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer that does see it at those very low levels, or we have that Taga bus, and that's why we're utilizing those pieces of equipment, because we know that we can see that butyl acrylate, which is what it sounds like you're describing.
Yeah, that one concerns me.
Are you guys checking for dioxins in the air? Because I've been told that it was only in the soil.
So we have not done any air sampling for dioxins. And as we talked about last week, you were there last week, the soil samples are coming back very favorable, but we're not done, of course. And we did get our last set of preliminary data back closer to where you live in Pennsylvania, and those all came back extremely low as well. Those particles, those very fine particles that came off the fire, and anybody who was in the smoke plume knows how, you saw it on your vehicles, you saw it on your home, right? Those fine particles, we would not expect, after all the weather that we've had, we would not expect those to, get back up in the air. It's just.
But they did.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, the sampling that we're doing is not showing that we have a dioxin problem. Now, if the analysis shows us something different, that'll change the game. But it's just right now we're not seeing it. Sure.
Okay, my son's.
I had a comment too.
Need a
about
microphone.
that. Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
So whenever you pull up the other side of the tracks, and if it's hot out, are all those chemicals, including dioxins, possibly going to go back up into the air?
So
To make everybody sicker again?
Matt addressed the dust management. You want to talk about that again?
Yeah, so the dust management, we are, under our direction, Norfolk has their contractors out there constantly spraying the roads, street sweeping, everything to keep that dust down, because that's where we would expect those dioxins. In terms of the other chemicals like vinyl or butyl, acrylate and whatnot, those, as it gets warmer, there is potential for those to volatilize more, but that's why we have this widespread air monitoring network. That way we can know that if we are starting to get detections now our meters, they have parts per billion sensors, so they can see down to that 10 parts per billion. If we start seeing those low levels and they start approaching like health screening levels, that's when we start having them institute what we call like engineering controls, which could be either if it's butyl, we can have them spray the butyl buster, or if we're detecting vinyl, we could have them do more ventilation or wetting it down and whatnot, or wetting it down wouldn't help as much, but we could have them start doing other things or moving into a different area that might not be as hot, trying to do those areas during cooler parts of the day so we don't have that volatilization to try to keep those vapors down. So those are the things that we're moving forward with. We're trying to keep those vapors down, suppress, and we're constantly monitoring them for them to make sure they're not spreading out from the site.
All right, my son's house is the very end of East Martin Street, right around on the north side of the tracks, though, right by CSI. And his neighbor had the tests done 2 weeks after, the derailment. His dioxins, they said safe levels were 6 and his were 30.
So that wouldn't have been us.
No, he had an independent.
Okay.
So, now it's been 11, 12 weeks. Will those dioxins go lower if he had to test it again, or was it just high because it was 2 weeks after?
No,
Was he very highly?
Well, first of all, was it a soil sample? Was it a water sample?
They did it all. They did. He doesn't have all his information back, but
Yeah.
they did inside his fridge, in his house, in his backyard.
Did Scott Smith do it by chance?
I'm not actually sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not
So I'd like.
but there's 4 houses.
Yeah.
CSI's on that side, and then the 4 houses on that side. That's my son's house and his neighbor's house.
So I'd love to know the details, right? And so if, once he gets all his data in, and if he's willing to sit down and share it with us, we're getting feedback here.
Yeah, well,
No, actually, I'm doing it.
and I would love it if you could come over and test
Yeah.
his house. If his is that high, I'm sure my son's house is.
Yeah. Well, again, it depends on what those levels are. If it was 30 parts per trillion or was it 30 parts per quadrillion, that's a whole different order of magnitude.
Okay.
The soil sampling that we've done.
Once I get the information, he said he'd give me a copy.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
So that's why I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Obviously, my son's not living there. He's not living there. Most people aren't living on that street.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're happy to look into it.
Okay.
For sure.
That'd be something where you make an appointment with the Welcome Center, and we can have a chemist or someone come and actually sit down and explain the results and look at it with you and kind of.
That's kind of a toxic area right there, because what's her name? She was right on the other side, you know, and
it's
buildings on this side.
Yeah, exactly. You're talking about Shelby.
Yeah, Shelby, yeah.
It's very industrial down there.
And my son's probably just as close, but obviously he's not living there, and neither is 3 of the neighbors. I think one is still living.
He's
there.
probably close to the big blue tanks.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
He's like right across the street from the big blue tanks.
Okay.
So.
Very good. Very good. All right.
Another question there?
Yeah. Any more? And all the way in the back?
So I just had a question regarding the CTEH. You know, when the evacuation was lifted, they said, okay, everybody come in. And I personally have not had them in to check my house. I'm 0.37 miles away. But every result that I saw posted online was exactly the same. So, and what you're saying now is that their equipment was not capable of picking up the levels that it should have.
For butyl. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and so, do you understand why, I know we've discussed how nobody trusts what's going on, and do you understand how the missteps made at the beginning have had so many ramifications with the trust levels? Because EPA said, have these people come in, test. Did it matter?
I totally get it. It does matter. It absolutely does matter because there were with the evacuation, lifting the evacuation. Screening the homes was voluntary, right? We based EPA based our recommendation to the city on what was going on in the outdoor area. The indoor air piece of it was voluntary. Now, at the time, we recognized that we were looking at action levels that were more in line with short-term exposure, which were higher. I mean, we can see those levels, okay? So that's important too, right? So, but because it's gotten confusing because now we're saying it's a lower level, and that's what we call the intermediate level, which is good. Which our health partners, our toxicologists say is that's the level that you can be exposed to up to a year and not be expected to have any adverse effects. Now with butyl acrylate, there's no long-term effects, but it's a sensitizer. So, and it's specifically a dermal sensitizer where you might get itchy skin, or you might have some other skin issues associated with prolonged exposure to that chemical. But because those numbers changed and because it then became below the level that we could see it with the instrument, it created confusion, it created some distrust. Totally get it. I can't
Why
argue
can't
with
we
it.
have one of them machines if we ask to come in and check now that we're testing positive for the people that are testing positive? Can we get a hold of you guys and bring in a machine that can actually detect it?
The photoionization detectors.
Yeah.
So we still do have the monitoring program active, but I'll be honest with you.
They're not going to do it.
We're happy to come in and monitor again, but these chemical compounds that we're dealing with are volatile chemicals, right? They break down very quickly in the atmosphere. They break down even faster during the day, with sunlight. So the realistic chance that vinyl chloride is actually present, sustained, is pretty unlikely. If we still have the program active.
Even though we're testing this high.
That's the hard part about this.
Yeah, the hard part about it is we're testing high. I mean, like I said, for people to say about smoking a cigarette, it would take 20 packs of cigarettes because it's in the nanos.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't want to get hung up on the cigarette thing, and there's other sources. You pump gas, you're going to get an exposure to benzene. You're probably going to have benzene in your urine that day, right? Those types of things do happen, but again, it's one of those situations where if we're not seeing it at the fence line sustained. That's the head scratcher, right? Why is that exposure happening? So. Yeah, but again, you, the two of you have offered some thoughts for us that we'll take back to our office. And I know that didn't answer your question perfectly, but you need to understand that we did have higher action levels during the emergency phase. So.
Do you have any other questions?
Again, just appreciate all you coming out. And we do have, we'll be here for a little bit if you want to ask us some individual questions. There's some posters. If you want to take a look at the sampling equipment, we have folks here to talk about that. Otherwise, again, next week, if you want to learn more about the well sampling program from Columbiana County, those folks will be here. Or if you know someone who's interested in that program, let them know. And also, again, if you want to capture anything, revisit anything from tonight, we have this recorded. It will be posted on our website. So appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming out, and we'll see you around town. Thank you.